esteemed guests, participants of the International Conference addressing political foundations in Europe. We can say that we will speak about all political foundations in Europe, and I do hope that when it comes to Slovenia, this will be the first event addressing the topic in question. But I hope this will be a very successful conference, as was the case when it comes to two other events organized by our foundation 2 years ago. They addressed basic income and social entrepreneurship. Both conferences had a very high profile, and they also had a profound impact on practical aspects of social entrepreneurship, also when it comes to adopting Slovenian legislation, and also when it comes to activities of various organizations in this field. And then another conference also had a very good impact in the media, and also had a very important impact when it comes to a new initiative of the European Union. In line with the Lisbon Treaty, it enables for citizens' initiatives. However, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the members which have already been enumerated, i.e. all the organizations within the European Liberal Forum. They were instrumental in organizing today's conference. What then is the purpose of today's conference? Above all, we pursue two main objectives. Firstly, we will talk about political foundations at the European level. And another objective, we will speak about political foundations in individual countries, both EU member states as well as other nation states around Europe. We all know very well that political foundations and the so-called think tanks, as we often call them, and we also use this term in Slovenian, have been in existence in some countries for several decades. And these organizations are well established. These entities, in fact, support political parties, political decision makers, as well as other political activists. They prepare in-depth analysis of a certain issue. They also point to certain issues which are topical. When it comes to other countries, other environments, I dare say in the so-called new democracies, and when it comes to new democracies, Slovenia is also part of this new democracy where this conference is held today. And these political foundations within new democracies have yet begun to flourish, and they are often weak, fragile, and vulnerable on a number of occasions. In order to understand their scope of activities, and this is the case both for politicians as well as civil society organization, political sphere and academia, is something which cannot be comprehended very well. For that reason, the Novum Institute, the Slovene institution, which makes an attempt to work as best as possible to the best of its abilities, and therefore an idea emerged that it might be a good idea to organize such a conference in order to discuss political foundations. And we felt that Slovenia was the right venue for such a conference. As I see things, and as I have already indicated, we will pursue two objectives today. First of all, I will speak about political foundations, and most notably about the European Liberal Forum, which is a non-profit political foundation at the European level. I would like to bid a very warm welcome to a member of the non-executive committee, Giulio. I don't know where he is at present, and also the executive director, Ms. Susanne Hartig. Later on, she will speak more about development, as well as in-house development, And she will also speak about the structure of the European Liberal Forum. At the outset, however, I would like to point out to one thing. We have been in the 7th year of existence, and in our opinion, we think that we are quite successful in our operations. We have been established, as is the case for all political foundations, and I believe that we have about 11 of those political foundations, and mostly the register office is in Brussels. They operate under Belgian law, and of course partly, as is the case with all others, they also need to comply with European acquis. And they were established in line with the regulation on political parties at the European level. And these are the so-called Euro parties, as political analysts denote them, in line with this regulation of 2003, which was amended in 2007, and now it is expected that a new amended version will be published, enabling slightly different legal system as well as methods of funding European political parties as well as foundations. And I have said that we have been actively involved in these processes together with other actors. Yet it seems that it will not be passed within this period of term of office, but probably after the European elections, which we all know will be held next year. What are we doing, actually? We are a non-profit organization primarily. We conduct analysis, we research, we debate, we put forward proposals on European public policies. In fact, this European dimension of all our European projects is our leitmotif, be it workshops, seminars, conferences, research projects, as well as publications. All these activities have a European dimension. Then another thing which needs to be highlighted as well is the geographical scope of our activities. In the past, we were limited to the European Union. However, now we also focus on our European neighbors, so Mediterranean, the southern dimension, as well as the eastern dimensions are very important. Then another thing, which I also think is quite relevant, and later on, and in accordance with various research of the European University Institute from Florence, we differentiate ourselves from other similar political foundations, at least how I see things, and also in accordance with our research and the rest of my knowledge. What is our relationship to our membership? Other organizations, when they embrace new members, the main condition is that these political foundations, think tanks or institutes have to be, in fact, confirmed or approved by national political parties. Yet we pursue a different policy. Of course, certain formal conditions need to be complied with. We have a certain procedure we need to follow when we embrace new members in 2 steps. However, it is also possible to become a member of our foundation, and it is also possible that you become a member if you are from a country where liberal political ideas are not as established, and even it is possible that you are in a state where there is no liberal political party. And this, I think, is a very positive aspect of our mission. Then another thing, when compared to other political foundations, I don't know actually what is the right term I would use, but the initiative for our actions, our activities, mostly comes from our members. So in fact, if we speak about centralization of our activities, we are the so-called member-driven organization. Despite this fact, however, we make an attempt to create our own European profile, and for that we have elaborated a number of instruments. We have a very flexible instrument. We have a series of roundtables with the terminology of Frau Staverholt. In this way, we attempt to strike a balance between different projects which are being implemented by our members, and on the other hand, certain activities which we do as a board of directors with the assistance of our secretariat, with a registered office in Brussels, and we try to launch Europe-wide activities. I will not take too long because this will be discussed further by our next speakers. So in terms of our previous development, I would like to raise these issues. After 5 years of existence, we have been able to conduct an in-depth external and internal assessment of our activities. We also put forward a strategy for our further operations. The main question when it comes to this area is, what is our relationship, what is our attitude when it comes to the European political party? This, in fact, is an association, alliance of national political parties, yet it also enables individual membership. If I'm not mistaken, this is, in fact, the only foundation enabling this, and it also has a good potential to develop into a true Europe party, and also how this party will develop itself. Will it be a party which tries to find its place under the sun, maybe in the European Parliament? Of course, this will depend on the number of votes we receive at elections, or maybe, and I hope that this will be heard today from our Vice President, and she is also here with us in Ljubljana, so maybe we will also be more oriented to elaborate Europe-wide policies. Maybe today this is probably more in the hands of the elder group within the European Parliament. But then when it comes to national political foundations, notably on the territory where I live and operate, in the Republic of Slovenia, and probably this is also the case for other EU member states, new member states, and also in our neighborhood, the so-called Western Balkans. When we speak about new democracy or newly founded states, which have been established about 20 years ago, I often think that this big, fine word of democracy, although blood has been spilled to fight for democracy and a lot of ink has been spent, and I am convinced that we need to fight on a day-to-day basis to achieve democracy, yet often democracy is just an empty word. And what is empty is also something which can be filled without any complications. And if I may resort to irony, a lot depends on where do we lay our emphasis. So whether we speak about demos, democracy, or whether we just want to rule and govern. The objective of democracy undoubtedly is to maintain and promote dignity as well as fundamental rights of individuals. We also need to strive for social cohesion, justice, and of course, we need to promote social and economic development for stability and prosperity. Having said that, democracies all around the world if we take into account interparliamentary union research, have quite a number of problems to face. The most prominent problems are as follows: corruption, abuse of office, for personal gains, for private gains, and this in fact contravenes the principle that if you are elected in democracy, then you need to rule and govern on behalf of the people and not to pursue your own goals. Therefore, corruption undermines the trust in government, the rule of law, and on a number of occasions it also is a threat to democratic processes. Secondly, when it comes to problems, we have the so-called tyranny of the majority. It is true that those decisions which are taken by majority are more democratic, yet sometimes it can happen that decisions by few people can become oppressive, especially when it comes to individuals or groups which are perceived as unwanted, undesired, or if certain groups, be it linguistic, ethnic, or other groups, are becoming excluded permanently from every division of power. Thirdly, a third problem, something which often goes wrong, is the executive branch of power. It has excessive control over the parliamentary legislative branch of power. Why? Because the government plays a very important role, of course. It needs to manage affairs, pursue policies, and put forward legislative proposals. Or sometimes political parties have a profound influence on the work of the parliament. What is of key importance for democracy is for the media to be pluralistic. But this is often threatened by the control taken over by the government or sometimes subtle pressures or censorship. On the other hand, there is also a problem of the concentration of ownership from different media outlets and different forms of the media outlets. Therefore, it is no surprise, and this also goes for Slovenia, where I live, that we are seeing apathy, and there is a lack of interest for politics and political activities. The government is no longer trusted, and the values of democratic processes are doubted. There is a question whether democracy will survive. A sense of powerlessness, that you no longer can influence political processes and decisions which affect all of us as individuals and societies. This only goes to show that something is very, very wrong. Yet, I believe that this apathy, in fact, doesn't mean that people I meet are no longer interested in politics. No, I think they are very much interested in politics, yet they have this sense of powerlessness, and this is probably the prevailing sentiment at present. How to resolve these problems? Of course, these are not the only problems we face. I can also speak about male domination of the political sphere. This, in fact, contravenes the principle of equality. Changes are, of course, possible, and here is where a potential for self-correcting of democracy lies. In this context, I believe that it is very important to create, establish institutions such as political foundations and think tanks. In my opinion, they have dual mission. They play a double role and serve two purposes. Firstly, the political focus, to act in the political sphere among parties and other actors, and also civil society. But these are not merely political organizations. They are also a cultural organization. Here we can create culture, political culture. I believe that yesterday I briefly spoke to some of you, and I will not dwell on that because probably my time is running out, but still, Raymond Williams once said, culture is a concept or one of the concepts which it is most difficult to define. Of course, culture is a lot of things, and many things are not culture. Yet, whatever we might think about political culture, and this is an activity which sometimes is in confrontation or is in search of a common compromise or consensus about our main objectives within a certain society, although when it comes to methods, we have certain differences, then if this is the case, I dare to say that these foundations can help us cultivate political and democratic dialogue. Let us not forget, culture is closely linked to civilization. A well-known, often controversial philosopher from Slovenia, Slavoj Žižek, who is considered to be a person who advocates liberal ideology in Slovenia, and I have in mind the leading political party in the 1990s in Slovenia and also at the beginning of 2000, who ruled Slovenia for a number of years, once said, the relationship between culture and civilization in opposition to primitive acts and barbarism. And I believe that we also need to consider this when we speak about necessity and possible actions of foundations in question. In other words, we need to create a democratic dialogue which is characterized by civilization values. Therefore, I would wish that such political foundations, if in Slovenia we adopt appropriate legislation to regulate their status, and this should define the scope of their activities, the relationship towards civil society and political organizations, then the relationship they have with the academia. And in this respect, these political foundations could have a very important role to play, not only for development of liberal mentality, liberal thoughts, but this would also have a positive impact on other political mentality, thoughts, and ideas throughout Slovenia. However, we are liberals, and we do want to make sure that the liberal foundation flourishes, and maybe we will also have a think tank in the future. And to do so, we need to start from liberalism. Giulio, recently at one of our workshops, spoke about liberalism and different definitions, because we have different definitions. Liberalism doesn't have just one founding father, but has plenty of founding fathers and maybe also a number of founding mothers. Yet, if we were forced to make a selection among different traditions of liberalism, and this was done by one of our directors from the Netherlands, Dr. Patrick Bachie, So from these traditions of traditional liberalism, social liberalism, at the present time and in this context, I would particularly refer to one tradition, the tradition of liberal thought, for which it is impossible to find an appropriate Slovenian term, Slovenian translation, the so-called Bildungsliberalismus, from von Humboldt as well as John Stuart Mill. It has two possible variations. First, every individual needs to develop his or her own talents, and if the role of the state should be involved, should be highlighted, then it should be limited merely to education and training. And secondly, our moral duty, this is something we owe to ourselves and to the society, to develop our own character. I will leave you with this thought. I do wish that our debate is lively and open, because we do have one competitive edge as political foundation when compared to political parties. We do not fight to win votes. We are not making propaganda. We are open. So I hope that we will have fierce arguments, plenty of ideas, and I hope that we will have a successful conference as well.